I believe the power of Kentucky lies in its people, not bigger government. I'll fight for women's reproductive freedom, defend public education, and work with Governor Beshear, not against them.
Well, I'll continue to work on things like healthcare and economic development. Certainly, we've made a lot of headway in tax reforms, putting more money in the pockets of our citizens, of their dollars. We've introduced many business-friendly policies that are actually recruiting businesses to Northern Kentucky in record numbers. And so, we'll continue to build those partnerships. We have worked a lot on pension reforms and local investments and things like that are really making a difference in the stability of benefits for teachers and state employees. And also on the local investment side of things, we are getting the Brent Spence Bridge. We have invested $1.3 billion, and that is without tolls. I think everyone probably knows that by now, but it was not without a lot of hard work to really make that happen. So that's what I enjoy doing, really seeing the fruits of our labors and the work that we're doing to reinvest taxpayer dollars in Northern Kentucky. This year, we were able to invest more than $150 million in the Covington infrastructure. And that is a mix of retail and residential and parks and moving the Chase Law School to Covington, as well as the UK NKU Partnership Med School. So we have a lot of really good things happening. We worked hard to get funding for the Children's Home of Northern Kentucky in Holly Hill and the Boys and Girls Club, and things that folks may not really think about often, but they're so critical to our families and to the kids who need them. It was very important for us to make sure that those programs are really bolstered. So on the healthcare side of things, I chair the Health Services Committee, and I'll continue working on access to care. This is something that I have spent a lot of time on, whether it's on maternal health or addiction treatment, standards of care. Mental health treatment is something that I've worked a lot on. So we've added and aligned our state policies on mental health parity with our federal guidelines and laws. I've worked on things like DPH transformation, the Department of Public Health, which made a huge difference in staffing, especially during COVID. We implemented this policy prior to a worldwide pandemic, and we were able to keep our local health departments open and functioning. And so, obviously, this is something that was critical during that time, and it's critical anytime. I've implemented policies on lung cancer screening. Kentucky is number one in lung cancer, for example. We really needed to have a better way of detecting cancers early, treating them early when it's more the treatment is better, and it's actually working. Kentucky has moved from in the 30s in lung cancer screening to number 2 in the nation, and that's just in the 2 years following the implementation of this policy. So the things that I'm working on may not make headlines, but they are helping people, and I'll keep working on those things. Workforce shortage in the healthcare space is huge, and we've done a lot to implement new programs that improve psychiatric care. We have a new psychiatry access program and loan forgiveness programs, P3s, the public-private partnerships, to get scholarships to all entry-level healthcare workers. So we are doing a lot, and I'm very busy. I've passed more than 40 pieces of legislation that have been signed into law, and I will continue to do that. I'll continue to be accessible to my constituents. They're all still focusing on access to care. we passed, like I said, the workforce shortage bills, or workforce healthcare worker shortage bills, but we also have worked on protections, putting protections in place for those healthcare workers. So violence protection. If we need to do anything around that, we'll certainly look at that. I'm always looking at barriers to healthcare and barriers to criminal justice reforms. Juvenile justice is something that I've worked on, and this is a situation in our state around juvenile justice that is really problematic. And so I'm sure that we'll be working on that again. On the barriers to healthcare side of things, I will reintroduce my prior authorization bill that looks at how to remove this barrier and make sure that patients get the healthcare that they need when it's prescribed. I have a long list of things. A lot of times we will work on cleanup bills, but I've got some things in the works where I'm working on how we collect healthcare data. And we don't really have a central repository for that sort of thing. And any great way to really audit Medicaid, which is a huge piece of our budget. I think we need more transparency.
Well, again, I'll fight for women's reproductive freedom, defend public education, and work with Governor Beshear. A priority for me would also include funding universal preschool in Kentucky because it lays a critical foundation for lifelong success. Research shows that 85% of brain development occurs before age 5, making early education essential for cognitive, social, and emotional growth. Universal preschool can significantly boost kindergarten readiness, a strong predictor for future academic success, as well as third grade proficiency, a crucial milestone in shifting from foundational skills to applied learning, which ultimately impacts high school graduation rates. Investing in universal preschool is a proven strategy to closing achievement gaps. It would also strengthen Kentucky's workforce by giving more families the opportunity to enter and stay in the workforce. For these reasons, it would be a top priority for me. Well, unlike my opponent, who has served as an obstacle for even allowing a discussion on the issue, I believe there needs to be an unbiased review and probably reform.
Well, I think that there are some things that we can probably clean up around certificate of need, but it is a complex system. And while I believe in a free market and the competition that drives a free market, healthcare is not a free market. It's not like going to the corner store. We have insurance providers negotiating reimbursement rates. We have Medicaid, we have Medicare, we have programs like the 340B pharmacy programs, and all of these are different payment models that really make it complicated. We had a legislative task force last summer during the interim, and they did quite a lot of research around surrounding CON, and they were really unable to come up with any concrete recommendations. And so as far as anything that outside of just scrapping the whole program, which is what some groups wanted to do, and I really think that's dangerous. I think that we need to be very deliberate and careful. Certificate needs simply stays the landscape of certain regions to ensure that there's fair and equitable distribution of services for the population of that area. And so we know that rural areas of our state serve a higher number of Medicaid and Medicare patients, and those reimbursements are very low. They're about 60 cents on the dollar. And so if a for-profit center, for example, comes into a region and they siphon off all services that they can make a high profit on, it leaves the charity hospitals in a really untenable financial position. And so I think that, we just really need to be careful. I think historically in Northern Kentucky, and not a lot of people know this, there were competing hospital systems, all of whom had certificate of need approvals. And I'm not exactly what I want to say, it was in the 90s, the Health Alliance, which is made up of, I think, Christ Hospital, UC, and I believe Mercy. They all owned the St. Luke hospitals in Florence and Fort Thomas. And they were largely found to be sending their sicker patients across the river to their main campuses and weren't making investments in northern Kentucky. And so, with financial solvency problems kind of looming in their reality, St. Elizabeth then bought those hospitals in order to maintain services in Boone and Campbell counties. So, this would actually be an interesting story for the link to do, because I think we did have some competing hospitals here, and now when folks want to come into Kentucky, they're not really it's not comparing apples to apples, right? They're not coming in to provide a full service hospital. They're coming in and providing only certain services, and that becomes problematic when, especially as I kind of described the rural hospital situation. Those hospitals are left with only Medicaid and Medicare at a very low reimbursement rate. It's not sustainable, and so while we overregulate things, um, probably at a higher level than we should. I think that there are some areas that we can look at reducing and making things more efficient. One quick point. Um, Ambulance service is something that I worked on in the past, and we tried to eliminate CON around ambulance services and ended up moving it from a substantive review to non-sub, and that speeds it up and makes it lower cost. So I think to apply. So I think we could do that maybe in certain instances. I am a proponent of educational opportunities for families, and so I will be voting yes. The constitutional amendment on the ballot will change the Kentucky Constitution from basically saying that public money must fund public common or public schools to saying public money can follow the child, basically. Right now, the legislature can't even weigh in on any school choice proposal because the Supreme Court has shot down legislation that we've passed the last few times, saying that it's unconstitutional. And so that's why we need to change this language. The amendment itself does not implement any sort of school choice program. It simply says that legislature can weigh in. Kentucky is surrounded by 7 states with some sort of educational freedom for families, and they all rank higher in educational attainment than we do. So I think it's time that we start looking at giving families an alternative to public schools. And this doesn't mean that we will not continue to fully fund the public schools. We have more fully funded public schools than ever before, and we'll continue to do that. But if the funding is following the child, then it really should not affect the funding as much as the hype would have people believe. I found it interesting that the Link article on education in Northern Kentucky a few weeks ago pointed out the benefits really of having alternative education and educational options for families. It talked about the positive changes that are seen in having things like the Institute and NKU's Young Scholars Academy and dual credit. And so this is just an extension of giving families a choice. Again, the constitutional amendment doesn't implement any sort of school choice program. It doesn't automatically implement vouchers, and this is kind of the opposition's hype, and it's just not true. All this does is allows the legislature to hear from constituents and pass legislation with. I would only be in favor of things with strict guardrails, and so I think that we need to support our public schools, but also give families a choice. And the ballot initiative gives voters a direct say in how to proceed with giving families alternative options. And there's no more pure form of democracy than that.
I will be voting no because, unlike my opponent, I oppose robbing our local public schools to pay for private vouchers or to subsidize corporate-owned charter schools with no accountability to taxpayers. If Amendment 2 passes, you can count on me to strongly advocate for the protection of our public school dollars and to firmly oppose vouchers for private schools and any legislation that may come up. I am also not in favor of charter schools, as studies show they consistently fail to demonstrate public accountability and equitable access for all students. However, I would be more inclined to consider a nonprofit or not-for-profit charter school structure if they could somehow meet these standards, though I remain skeptical that they can. And for these reasons, I will continue to push for measures that prioritize and strengthen our public schools.
I would want to make sure that low-income families are probably the priority as far as having educational opportunities. I like the scholarship tax credit. Those are, it's a trust that is set up through local businesses or others, maybe even individuals who can contribute to this trust to provide scholarships for students. Those scholarships would be probably appropriated. I mean, we set the policy, so we could have KDE appropriate those scholarships if we want, or others, I'm not sure. But I really like that because folks who contribute to the trust, and the amount was capped, so they can get tax credits for contributing and offering those scholarships to primarily low-income families. I think that there are some real positives to allowing families to find the best fit for their child. And I want low-income families to have the same opportunities as the higher income constituents that we have. I was able to send my children to private schools, and I want everyone to have that opportunity. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough issue. I understand how devastating rape would be, which is really what makes this such a difficult policy to navigate, and it's why we need guiding principles. I haven't seen any legislation allowing for exceptions for rape or incest unless the situation is causing a life-threatening medical situation that I could support. Oftentimes, abortion leaves women with even more trauma than she's already experienced. I am personally pro-life. I am a former neonatal intensive care nurse where I saved babies who were born prematurely every day. And so it's hard for me to look at these babies and think that they're not worth fighting for or that their lives are any less valuable because of the circumstances of their conception. I think I'd also like to hear from my constituents on this issue, but that's kind of my stance. I would rather the government take common sense, life-protecting approaches and work to prevent abortion by understanding the difficulties and the challenges that affect women who are facing an unplanned pregnancy. We can find ways to build in supports for she and her family. Compassionate and ongoing supportive care is really shown to reduce abortion and put families who are struggling on more firm footing. I'd also like to say that I would not support banning contraception. That has been a topic that people bring up, and it's certainly nothing I would support. Secondly, I think that we need to have the harshest penalties possible for the heinous crime of rape, and that includes for incest. I've been really privileged to champion and to pass substantive maternal health legislation over my time in the legislature. And pregnancy, we passed the maternal health bill, the Momnibus, last session. And this is a great example of how we support moms. Pregnancy is now a qualifying life event for insurance coverage where it wasn't before. Mental health care is now immediately available to pregnant and parenting women all through postpartum. And so this is for any mom with a mental health or a substance use disorder, and the program's called Lifeline for Moms. We also added remote patient monitoring and home addiction treatment, lactation support, expansion of PANS. I mean, it does a lot. Oh, and then I also passed a law a couple of years ago, which extended Medicaid for 12 months into postpartum. And so these are some ways that we can find supports, really build in those supports for mothers and babies, and make sure that she's not re-traumatized by having to make this really difficult decision. We have scholarships that are now available for women who are facing unplanned pregnancy so that she doesn't feel like she must give up her dreams of furthering her education to support her family. And I guess the last thing I would say, maybe two things. We need to remember that abortion is a medical procedure that ends a life. And so it should be used rarely and in cases where the mother has a life-threatening condition, which it should be diagnosed by her physician. And then, unfortunately, a lot of what we're hearing is the Democratic position, which is abortion on demand and at any stage up to full term. And those really, in my mind, are extreme views. So hopefully that answered your question. That's my position.
Well, unlike my opponent, who signed a pledge supporting Kentucky's extreme abortion ban, one of the most dangerous in the nation, with no exceptions for rape or incest, I believe in common sense exceptions to Kentucky's abortion ban for rape, incest, and the life and health of the mother, just like the majority of voters in House District 64 expressed when they decisively rejected a ballot measure designed to deny any constitutional protections for abortion. Well, while I understand that many Republicans are embarrassed by Matt Bevin's pardon debacle in 2019, I do not support limiting pardon power because the right way to deal with this is to elect responsible individuals to serve as governor in the first place.
Gubernatorial pardon power. Yeah, I think I would. I mean, we've seen some real problems with pardons that governors have put in place. We've seen individuals reoffend, and yeah, I think that we, within reason, can find some ways to. Well, I think because we're having conversations about this, some of our higher education institutions are rolling them back without legislation. But I think that, certainly it's important to have diversity, and it's important to have inclusiveness. And it's important to teach people and emulate respect for one another. And I think we can do that without having an entire department dedicated to this. I just don't, I don't support UK, for example, spent $10.5 million on their DEI department. And so that's money that really should be spent on higher education in the classrooms, and not setting some sort of mandate or quota. I don't think that quota systems work. I think they're divisive. And I would hope that, because I think a lot of what we work on could have been solved in kindergarten. We teach our kids to respect one another, and not see color, not see race, not see ethnicity, that we are all human beings and we all have merit. And I think that individuals would probably rather be recognized based on their merit than their race or their ethnicity.
I oppose the unreasonable restrictions lawmakers attempted to pass last session, failing in their efforts. I believe higher education is an important place to learn about the value of inclusion and a diverse array of experiences. While the General Assembly is obviously limited in its ability to impact housing shortages at the local level, I would work with the Kentucky Housing Corporation to come up with creative ways for the General Assembly to propose initiatives to help alleviate the local housing shortage. I would also be interested in investigating a workforce housing tax incentive.
That's tough, and we have a task force that's looking at that issue right now. I think until the federal government really is who controls interest rates and those sorts of things. So I'm anticipating that interest rates will come down, especially now that it's election time. Probably they're coming down. I don't know, mid-October is my guess. But I think that the high interest rates are a problem, and I know that just the cost of housing is out of reach. I have children who are in their 20s and early 30s who are buying homes and spending a whole lot more than the homes were valued at just a couple of years ago. So I understand how tricky it is, and that it is out of reach for a lot of folks. I don't know. I would never be in favor of rent capping or setting any sort of caps. I think that really diminishes entrepreneurship and homeownership. Certainly we want landlords, if someone's looking to rent, we want someone who is, I would maybe look at giving local business owners or homeowners who are looking to buy and rent their properties, maybe giving them an incentive to buy rather than some out-of-state conglomerates that come in and scoop up lots of real estate and are able to charge exorbitant rates. It's a tough issue. Property values have increased, and property value taxes. I mean, that's another issue that I hear from my constituents about. And so it's very concerning. It is something that we're looking at. I'm not positive that it's the government's role to solve all housing issues. Sometimes we make it worse, and we certainly wouldn't want to do that. I do. I agree with the metrics that we have put in place. I think that ensuring that we have revenue metrics and that we're checking this often is critical. We don't want to put our state in the position of not being able to fund critical infrastructure. And so, while I support putting money back in the pocket of our taxpayers, I absolutely think that we need to be careful. And so far we are. So we have gone from 6% personal and corporate income tax to 5% corporate. And we are in a position to go down to 3.5% in 2025 because we did meet those revenue benchmarks. So yes, I think it's, anytime that we can put money back in the pockets of our hardworking constituents, that's a good thing.
No, just this past May, the Republican Speaker of the House acknowledged that elimination of income tax in Kentucky would require major changes to the way Kentuckians are taxed and would require a massive increase in state sales tax to make up for the budget shortfalls. That's not going to work for the people of Kentucky and would be a burden to our hardworking families.